Hello all, it's Ruthie here and I'm here with Wendy Hamilton, aka Mum. And last week we talked about how to protect the belief in your child that they can read even if they're struggling with it, even if they're struggling to the point they have dyslexia like I do. And how Mum dealt with that when I was a small child and I was learning to read. And if you are raising a child with dyslexia or really any different style of learning, because we don't actually believe it's a disability.
No, we don't.
So we're going to say a different style of learning. I do encourage you to check out our video that we made together called Dyslexia is Not the Problem. You can find that over on my chatting from the little chats from the fireside, and I encourage you to check that out. And today we're going to get a bit more practical because we established that it's really important to protect the belief of a child. And today I'm going to ask Mum, how do you do that?
Well, that's a really good question, Ruth. And I would say that particularly if you have a dyslexic child or a late bloomer, and as Ruth said, any child with a learning difficulty thing.
Who learns differently?
Because
we're inclined to feel it's not a disability.
No.
Someone who learns differently.
Somebody who learns differently. These are blessings. Now, if you've got a child that learns differently, I think the best thing you can do is, if you at all possibly can, is to homeschool them.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I say that is because there's so much more flexibility and you've got so much more power to protect their belief that they can learn, which of course is true.
Yeah, of course.
But if you put them in a system that's not going to work for them.
And I would just say about that, because it's a huge privilege to be able to homeschool.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, if you can't, I would say make sure your child knows that you are on your child's side. Your child needs to know that you believe in them. And if it comes down to a question of who you're going to believe, the teacher or the child, the most important thing you can give your child, I believe, is the child knows that you are in their corner and that you believe in them 100%. And at the end of the day, Albert Einstein's teacher thought he was an idiot. And, well, I don't think we need to say much about that. I think history has proved to us what the case was with that. So if you can't homeschool, at least know your child, have your child know that you believe in them 100%, because it really comes down to that child knowing that you believe in them. Eh?
Oh, absolutely. My mother used to say to me...
Because you weren't homeschooled.
No, I wasn't. And my mother used to say to me, look, it's not the kids that win all the prizes at school that necessarily do well in life.
Yeah.
And I remember, strangely enough, she was trying to help me at home, apparently. I don't actually remember this, but she tells the story. I was about 10, and she went to a teacher's, what do you call them, those?
Conference?
No.
Parent.
That's a teacher-parent thing. And my teacher, he was the first man teacher I'd had, and he was actually really great. But he said to Mum, he said that Wendy's got a severe problem with spelling, and she will never understand the difference between the spelling of road or horse and road that you drive on.
Actually, she does.
Well, actually, I do. But
that's a miracle.
It is a miracle. And he said, and furthermore, I think she's getting a lot of the problem from the family. And which I don't know if that was true or not. But anyway, Mum tells the story how she was such a good speller. She was absolutely devastated. And she said she walked all the way home. I don't know why she did this, but she walked all the way home with one foot in the gutter, and probably mirroring her emotional state.
Grandma has unique coping.
Yes, and when she got home, she said to me what my teacher had said. And she tells the story that relief flooded my face, and I said, because she had been saying, oh, we'll just work it at home, And
this is not a problem that is going to come right with more effort. This requires a different approach.
No, because I said to my mother, I admitted, she said, relief flooded my face. And I admitted to her that I couldn't copy either, because the ability to take, they'd write on the blackboard and we'd have to write down, and my ability to translate the words on the blackboard and get them in order onto the page.
Just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and that's still a problem, like phone numbers and things like that. I'll swap them. That's quite a difficult thing for me to do.
That is very true. I'm not really surprised you couldn't copy, because it seems to me that with dyslexia, it's a real struggle to see those details.
And I think a lot of that comes down to the creative brain, because
I agree.
what I do is, and I think this is typical for very creative people, is that any information that comes into my brain is just like clip art for me to do something different with
exactly.
it. Like, I wouldn't copy, I get, when I'm painting and stuff like that, I get heaps of inspiration from all sorts of people and everything, but I would never produce a copy.
No.
That's pretty well impossible for me, because I'm always bringing lots of different things into the whole thing. And strangely enough, Mum's acceptance of the fact that I would never be a speller actually really took the pressure off me. And
I think that's key. I think it's taking the pressure off. Take the pressure off.
And if you take the pressure off and you take the performance off the child, that allows the child to go at their own pace, because a lot of these problems that you have with dyslexic kids and also late bloomers and different learning styles is because the child is not yet mature. And they're all going at different rates.
And if you add to that a brain that is wired differently, you get a different result. And it's interesting what you're saying about pressure, because do you remember, like, one thing I have never struggled with is telling a story. But there was one time where, because I was so lackluster in every area of academics, but I would go to the bottom of the garden. There was a lovely swing hanging off this tree, and I used to play on that swing and tell myself very elaborate stories. And one day, well, you tell them.
Wow. I would hear all these amazing stories going on at the tree while she was riding this horse and everything, and I thought,
the only activity I ever did anything, my only activity.
Oh gosh, yes, and she never shut up. And I thought, wow, we're doing so badly with the homeschooling and everything that at least I could record something and I could get a story out of her, because I would get her to dictate things and that, but it was pretty hard on us. And these were elaborate stories. So I came up with what I thought was a brilliant idea, and I bought her like a little, well, back in the day, a little tape recorder thing, and it was a little kid's one. It was a natty little thing. It was white, had a little microphone and everything. And I put some little straps on it, and I strapped it onto her back, and so that she could record the stories while she was swinging. And then I thought,
and up to this point, I'd been doing this for hours and hours and hours a day.
No problem at all. The minute that thing went on your back, you tell the rest.
I couldn't do it. It was too much pressure. The fact someone was listening was just too much pressure. So that was the end of that, which goes back to the point that sometimes when you add pressure, especially with the creative child. Creative children are wired different.
They are.
Okay, so it's really important to protect the child's belief that they can learn. So what do you do with, sometimes you're in a situation where sometimes mothers can actually use their children to compete. And, I think that's very painful for the mother. How do you protect the child from realising that there's this competition going on?
Well, the first thing that I would say is, if you have a toxic friend in your life that's doing that, probably limit your exposure to them. And don't believe it yourself, and certainly don't pass it on to the child. I think too, what really helped me was reading up on the development of the brain, because the brain develops in stages rather than in set milestones. Because like if you've got a late blooming child or a dyslexic child, that especially late blooming children, you can see they follow all the typical, there's a process to the brain developing, but they may be going at a slower rate. So what you're looking at is not age milestones, but you compare your child against your child. Are they going through the normal milestones, even though they're a lot slower? And I think it's very important to protect your child as much as you possibly can from public humiliation.
And the reality is, it is not really all right for parents to be competing through their children, because
it's toxic. It's very destructive.
I don't think it's setting up a good example either, because of course competition can be good in sports or business, I think it's more of a grown up virtue. And I think when you've got small children, I mean, there is, I think for the mothers who are doing this, I've always felt that they're probably not making a very good example of empathy for their children.
It's a very, very toxic thing to do.
But I think also that what you were really good with is the mother must bear again, it goes back to the mother must bear the brunt of this.
Oh yes.
You can't pass it on.
Absolutely. You can't cut, if you're going to cry, and you will, cry in private, and get yourself together and don't pass it on to your child.
Yeah.
But I remember John was about, he would have been about 12 when we were in Colorado, and we went to we went to this house church, and they had a situation where everyone was going around. It's quite normal. Everyone goes around and they read a portion of the Bible. And there were a lot of people there, and there were a lot of children there, and there were a lot of children that were reading very well. Well, this is, for a child that's not reading, this is one of the worst situations
That's
that
terrifying.
You can have.
It's terrifying.
If you're in school, you're probably facing this regularly.
If think of it as an adult, your average adult would not appreciate being kidnapped and told, we're going to put you in a football stadium and you're going to give a speech in front of 5,000 people, and if your speech is not perfect, they're all going to say, boo! That's how a child feels.
In a second language.
Very nice. I like
so
that.
So anyway, we're in this situation, and they're coming round, and our family's sort of sitting in a line, and John was in the middle of you kids, I think. And I thought, I was concerned, and as we got closer and closer to John, I could feel the tension rising. And so what happened was, it was really beautiful, because the kids, whoever was on both sides of them without any signals at all, the one that it came to first, they read their portion, because they were reading by that stage. They read their portion, and then with no fanfare at all, they just whipped onto the next child, and it was done so adroitly. I don't know if anyone really noticed, and if they did notice, who cares? Because John was protected. John's sense that nobody knew that he couldn't read. His dignity was protected.
His dignity, because the thing is that once you start cutting into a human's dignity, good luck getting them to focus on anything else.
Oh, because that will shut down.
That is not a kid thing. That's a human thing.
It is. And as soon as you feel that you're dumb and you're under pressure, you're going to shut down that whole learning curiosity.
It's actually the frontal cortex.
Shut down the frontal cortex.
The frontal cortex, which processes language, will close down, because I think it's the amygdala. The amygdala, which is in charge of protecting you, that's going to take over. So you do not. It's a disaster.
Absolute disaster.
It's a disaster. Yeah. So I think that is the main thing. You just got to be sensitive, and I think the value is that, if you have one child that learns differently, but your other children learn the same, it's no bad thing to have your children schooled in empathy.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you keep a child unaware they're trailing? And obviously you might not be able to do this with school, but I suppose it's even more important if they're going to school. How do you give a child like that a sense of winning with reading?
Well, what I used to do was I would use rhyming books. Like Ruth's written one here about a very good wife is hard to find. And
based off Proverbs 31.
Yes. Now, children, I used to use Dr. Seuss books a lot and everything like that, because they're fun and everything. Children who have trouble learning to process the written words and that can usually process rhymes and songs and stuff like that. So if you get a book that you're reading, and reading is a given, you've got to be reading to these children. If you get a book that's rhyming, like a Dr. Seuss book and everything, they readily will put this to memory.
Did you know it's an aspect of language, that poetry was developed to help us remember things faster in an oral society? Yeah,
I
before we
don't.
made that move to literature. That's why a lot of the great epics are actually poetry, even though they're different from our poetry. But the whole concept
They're easier
is
to memorise.
absolutely in an oral society where you don't have the written word, and it still works.
It still works. So what I would do is that they would, and this is good for reading skills too, if you've got a child that is progressing at a normal rate too. I remember Rachel sitting up in bed and she had her little brothers and she used to love them, and she
She still loves them.
she still does. She was not reading at that stage. She was about 5 or something. She'd sit in bed with her little brothers on her side, and she'd have a Dr. Seuss book, and she would be reading the book to them. And so she would be turning the pages at the right stage, and she would be reading the memorized thing. And so she had a sense that she was reading, and if she got a bit stuck, she made up her own words, and it was perfectly all right. And so she had that experience of reading.
And I think the other thing that you did really well is when the child twigs that they are not going at the same speed as their peers, and they will, because children are not stupid and they're very observant, and even if you take every precaution in the world, they will work it out. You need to tell them the right story. So you need to, this is something Mum did very well, even if you're shaking with terror on the inside, you don't tell your child that.
No, I don't know if you remember this, but one day Ruth was very upset. I think you might have been about 10. And she was very, very upset about her spelling, her difficulty with spelling. And I said to her, Ruth, these are package deals. I said, what are you willing to lose to be able to spell well? Would you, because she was doing all these, from a young age, she was doing all these wonderful little drawings of mice and everything. And I said, what would you be willing to lose for it? Would you be willing to trade in your art to be a good speller? And she said, no. And I think you need to point out that, and this doesn't come to just spelling, it's anything, because we all have weaknesses and strengths.
No, the Bible says that God puts the good and bad side by side,
Exactly.
so no man can separate it.
So whatever your child is that they feel a lacking in, you can point it out to them. Yeah, you might have a lacking in this, but what have you got that would you be prepared to give up this? And I'd say almost 100% that which is our talents, like a child that's a really, really good speller would not probably want to swap that.
No.
My mother wouldn't have wanted to swap it for art.
Because it's part of your identity.
It's part of your identity. So whatever it is that your child is struggling with, point out that this is directly in a correlation. You get higher in something else.
If you change this, you'd lose something.
Yeah, you don't just get it added on. No, you lose something, and you need to realise that.
Yeah.
You need to realise that as a parent yourself too.
That's absolutely right. And I would also say that one thing that's really useful about having a different approach to learning is I think it heightens your empathy, because, when you have something in your life that no amount of work is going to completely fix, I think it gives you a compassion on other people when they have things that they really can't fix either. And I personally think maybe God gives us strengths in one area and weaknesses in other areas to keep us connecting, because it's so relational.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, so I think that that's a valuable thing too. If your child is struggling, it's going to create empathy, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So to recap, give them rhyming books.
Yes.
Protect their dignity.
Yes.
Don't allow another parent competing with you over them to register on their radar.
Yeah.
And if they work it all out and they're upset, you tell them a story that gives them the courage to keep going.
Yeah. And I just add one more practical thing. What I used to do for them in order to make the whole concept of reading enjoyable is I would have little treasure hunts when I felt up to it. And I would write down where to find all the clues. So decoding it became really high interest because at the end they were going to get a little prize. So anything that you can do like that too, that's going to actually link the idea that there is value in actually learning it.
So, Mum, do you have a book maybe on homeschooling?
I'm so glad you asked that question. For anybody that's interested, I wrote a book on what happened in our home with homeschooling. The reason why I wrote this book is because many people think that homeschooling is doing school in the home, which can't be further than the truth. If you try and do school in your home, you're going to burn out within 2.5 days. I thought that I was weird with this and I was a terrible teacher, but once we had the COVID hit, I realized that I was just normal. So you've got to do it a different way, and it doesn't even look like school most of the time. So,
and let's be honest, if you are dealing with homework, you are homeschooling.
Absolutely. So this is just stories about what I learned and what happened in our family, so people can actually have a little peep into what a homeschool is actually. A typical homeschool, I mean, they vary a lot, but you know what it would look like, because it doesn't look like school in your home.
Yeah, but the thing is that it's also a really funny book, so even if you're not into homeschooling, if you want a jolly good read, I mean, eating a light bulb does not make you bright, and unfortunately, that is based on a true story, which we will not be going into. But if you want the book, you can get that on Amazon, or you can get it wherever good books are sold, or you can get it over at our website, zealouspublishing.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.